At 63, I thought I'd seen everything life had to offer, but nothing prepared me for the moment my 7-year-old granddaughter looked me in the eye and said, "Grandma, the man in white who saved me from the ocean wasn't an ordinary person, and now I can see things other people can't." In the months that followed, I witnessed events that challenged everything I'd ever believed about the world, discovered a secret network of people with extraordinary gifts that has existed for decades, protecting entire families, and faced the desperate resistance of my own son, who almost destroyed his daughter's future because he couldn't accept that real miracles still happen today. If you've ever gone through the experience of seeing someone you love develop unexplainable abilities after a traumatic event, or if you've always felt there's something greater protecting your family, even in the toughest moments, then you need to hear this story that completely changed our lives and might deeply touch your heart as well. Stay with me until the end, because what we discovered about angels, divine protection, and the power of family love will move you in a way you never imagined possible. The coffee mug slipped from my trembling hands and shattered on the kitchen floor when I saw my granddaughter Mia being dragged away by the raging waves of Clearwater Beach. It was 7 in the morning on that Tuesday in March, and I had woken up early to make us breakfast while she was still asleep in her room. Or so I thought. My name is Catherine Sellers. I'm 63 years old, and in that moment I felt my heart nearly stop in my chest. Mia, with her 7 years and that stubborn streak she inherited from her father, had slipped out of the house without a sound and gone into the ocean alone. The waves were rougher than usual that morning, and the tide was coming in with a force I'd never seen in our 15 years of vacationing in the very same spot. I ran across the wet sand with a speed I didn't know I still possessed, screaming her name until my throat was raw. My old legs couldn't seem to carry me to her in time, and with every passing second, I saw my granddaughter being pulled further from the shore. She was screaming for help, her small arms fighting against the current, and I knew I couldn't reach her. That's when he appeared. A tall man, dressed entirely in white, emerged from the water as if he were walking on solid ground. He didn't run, didn't swim desperately like any normal person would. He simply walked toward Mia with a calm that defied all logic in that moment of panic. His clothes remained dry even as waves crashed around him, and there was something in his face that conveyed absolute serenity. By the time I finally reached the water's edge, breathless and with my heart pounding erratically, the man had already brought Mia back to the sand. She was wet, scared, but unharmed. She coughed up a little of the salt water she'd swallowed, but her eyes shone with a strange tranquility that didn't match the fright she'd just experienced. "She'll be fine," the man said, his voice carrying a musical tone I would never forget. His eyes were a deep, almost translucent blue, and when he smiled at me, I felt an inexplicable peace wash over me. "Take good care of her. She's special." Before I could ask his name, thank him properly, or even fully process what had happened, he turned and walked toward the rocks that bordered our small private beach. I tried to follow him with my eyes, but when I blinked, he was simply gone. He had vanished as if he had never been there. Mia, still trembling in my arms, looked toward where the man had gone and whispered, "Grandma, he said he'll always take care of me. He said I'm going to help other people too." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, because I knew a 7-year-old wouldn't make something like that up, especially after such a scare. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it had all been a misunderstanding, that maybe the man was just a tourist swimming nearby and that I, in my desperation, had imagined details that weren't real. But Mia wouldn't stop talking about him, describing his appearance with perfect accuracy and repeating the words he had said. My son Robert arrived from Atlanta the next day, after I called to tell him about the incident. He's an engineer, a practical and skeptical person by nature, and when Mia tried to tell him about the man in white who saved her, He just smiled condescendingly and said she was very lucky to have found a good swimmer at the beach. But I knew there was more to it, something my rational mind refused to accept, but that my heart felt with absolute certainty. That man was not ordinary. The way he appeared, how he walked on the waves, how his clothes stayed dry, how he vanished without leaving a trace in the wet sand. None of it made sense within the logic of the world I knew. Robert insisted we return to Atlanta that same day, claiming the beach was dangerous, and it wasn't safe for Mia to play near the ocean. We packed our bags quickly, and during the entire drive back, my granddaughter remained unusually quiet, staring out the car window with a thoughtful expression I had never seen on her little face. It was only a week later, back in our routine in the city, that I started noticing the first changes in Mia. Small things at first, so subtle they almost went unnoticed. She started predicting when the phone would ring, running to answer it seconds before the first chime. She knew when it was going to rain, even when the sky was completely clear. She would wake up in the middle of the night knowing someone needed help, and the next day we'd find out a neighbor had felt ill during the night. Robert chalked it all up to coincidence, but I felt there was a direct connection between that encounter at the beach and my granddaughter's new abilities. Mia didn't seem scared by these perceptions. On the contrary, she accepted them with a naturalness that left me both amazed and worried. The situation grew complicated when she started having recurring nightmares. They weren't typical childhood dreams, but vivid visions of people in danger. She would wake up in the middle of the night, crying and describing specific situations. A child getting lost at the mall, an elderly man falling down the stairs, a woman needing help on the street. At first, I thought they were just reflections of the scare she'd had. But when some of these situations actually happened in the following days, a chill ran down my spine. Robert became genuinely concerned when Mia started losing sleep regularly. The dark circles under her angelic little face broke my heart, and seeing my granddaughter, who had always been a cheerful and playful child, become increasingly withdrawn and melancholic was devastating. She stopped playing with her dolls, lost interest in the cartoons she loved so much, and spent most of her time sitting on the porch, looking up at the sky as if she were waiting for something. Things worsened when Robert decided it was time to seek professional medical help. He took Mia to various specialists in Atlanta, pediatricians, neurologists, child psychologists. All the tests showed a perfectly healthy child, with no physical or mental changes that could explain her behavioral shifts. But Robert wasn't convinced and insisted there had to be a scientific explanation for everything. The tension at home grew with each passing day. Robert blamed me for feeding fantasies into Mia's head, while I desperately tried to understand what was happening to my granddaughter. He went so far as to forbid any conversation about the incident at the beach, threatening to stop me from seeing Mia if I continued, filling her head with nonsense. It was in this climate of tension and misunderstanding that we reached the end of the first month after the rescue. Mia had become a shadow of her former self, and I felt I was losing not only my granddaughter but also my son, who refused to consider the possibility that there were things in the world that science couldn't yet explain. One April afternoon, while Robert was at work, Mia came to me in the kitchen and held my hand with a surprising strength for such a small child. Her eyes, normally brown and bright, seemed to carry a weight that shouldn't exist in a 7-year-old girl. "Grandma," she said with a seriousness that frightened me, "the man from the beach didn't leave. He's still here taking care of me, but Daddy doesn't believe it, and that's making everything very hard." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized my granddaughter was carrying the weight of an experience that neither she nor I could fully comprehend alone. In that moment, I made a decision that would change the course of our lives. I was going to find out the truth about that man in white, whatever it took, even if it meant facing Robert's wrath and questioning everything I'd ever believed in. The decision to investigate what really happened that morning in Clearwater came with a mix of determination and fears I had never felt before. For the next 2 weeks, while Robert worked and Mia was at school, I dedicated every free moment to trying to understand the mystery that had settled into our lives. I started by calling the management of the beach resort where we stayed. Ms. Peterson, the manager, had known me for years and was always very helpful. When I asked about the lifeguard who worked at the beach during March, her tone of voice changed immediately. "Oh, Catherine, that was such a strange situation with Jake," she said, sighing deeply. "He worked with us for 5 years, always so responsible and dedicated. But the day after the incident with your granddaughter, he showed up in my office asking to resign. He was pale, nervous, saying he had seen something he couldn't explain and that he couldn't work on the beach anymore." My heart raced. "Ms. Peterson, do you have his phone number? I really need to speak with Jake." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Look, Catherine, I can give you the number, but I don't know if he'll want to talk. Ever since he left, he's been avoiding the subject. His wife called me last week, saying he's been having nightmares and won't even go near the beach. I got Jake's number, but when I called, his wife, Marlene, was firm. He wouldn't talk about it. She said her husband had been through a trauma and that a doctor had recommended he avoid anything related to the incident. But something in her voice made me persist. "Please, Marlene. My granddaughter was also affected by what happened. Maybe if they talked, they could help each other." After much insistence, she agreed to pass my message to her husband. 2 days later, Jake called me. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he were afraid someone was listening. "Mrs. Sellers, I don't know if I should be talking about this. My family thinks I'm going crazy." He took a long pause. "But I saw it, ma'am. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. That man he wasn't normal." My breath caught. "What do you mean, Jake?" "I was at my post, watching the beach like I always do. I saw your granddaughter go into the water alone and was already running to help her when the waves took her. But before I could get close, that man appeared." His voice trembled. "Mrs. Sellers, he didn't swim to her. He walked on the water like it was solid ground. And when he brought the girl back, there wasn't a single drop of water on his clothes." A shiver ran down my spine. "And then he looked right at me, as if he knew I was watching, and he smiled. Then he just disappeared into the rocks. When I went to look, I couldn't find a single trace of him. No footprints in the sand. Nothing. It was as if he had never existed." The conversation with Jake confirmed my suspicions, but also raised more questions. If an experienced adult like him had witnessed the same thing I had, then I wasn't imagining things. But that meant something truly inexplicable had happened that morning. During this time, Mia continued to have her episodes of premonition. At school, she started drawing the attention of her teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, for predicting small accidents before they happened. When a classmate was about to fall off the swing set, Mia would run to help her. When someone forgot their lunch, she would share hers even before the person realized they were hungry. Mrs. Reynolds called me for a private meeting after 2 weeks of these incidents. She was a middle-aged woman with over 20 years of experience with children, and her expression was one of genuine concern. "Mrs. Sellers, I need to talk to you about Mia. She has always been a special child, but lately, she's been showing a sensitivity that intrigues me." Mrs. Reynolds flipped through some notes. "She seems to know when other children are going to get hurt, when someone is sad even if they're trying to hide it, when it's going to rain even with a clear sky. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but it's happening too frequently." I asked her for specific examples, and what I heard made me even more convinced that Mia had been truly transformed by the encounter with that mysterious man. "Last week, she told me that Peter was going to hurt his arm during recess." I laughed, thinking it was a child's imagination, but 15 minutes later he fell from a tree and fractured his wrist. Yesterday, she warned me that the janitor, Joanna, was very sad because her son had argued with her. When I asked Joanna, she confirmed she had indeed argued with her son the night before, but hadn't told anyone at school. The teacher looked at me with an expression that mixed curiosity and worry. What strikes me the most is that Mia isn't scared by these perceptions. She accepts them with an impressive naturalness, as if they were a normal part of her life. But I've noticed she's more withdrawn, less playful than before. When I got home that afternoon, I found Robert in the living room, with a grim expression I hadn't seen in a long time. He had discovered my investigations by chance when Marlene called the house, looking for me, and ended up speaking with him. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice laced with restrained irritation. "I found out you've been investigating this beach story, talking to the former lifeguard, asking questions all over the place. This needs to stop now." I tried to explain that I only wanted to understand what was happening with Mia, but Robert wouldn't listen. He was convinced my obsession was harming his daughter's recovery process, and that I was feeding her fantasies that only made things worse. "Mia is in therapy precisely to overcome this trauma, and you're doing the exact opposite of what the doctors recommend," he said, slamming his fist on the table. "If you don't stop this, I'll be forced to limit your visits with her. I can't allow you to keep confusing my daughter's mind with these absurd stories." Robert's threat hit me like a punch to the gut. The possibility of being kept from seeing my granddaughter was unbearable, but at the same time I couldn't just ignore everything I had discovered. Mia was suffering, and I felt that the answer to her suffering was connected to that mysterious man. That night, after Robert had gone to bed, Mia came to my room. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she was shivering as if she were cold, despite the warm night. "Grandma, I dreamed about him again," she whispered, climbing into my bed and snuggling into my arms. "He told me you're on the right path, that you need to keep searching, but he also said it's going to get harder before it gets easier." I held my granddaughter with all my strength, feeling tears stream down my face. "What else did he say, my love? That there are other people like me, that he's helped before, and that you'll find them if you don't give up?" Mia lifted her little face to look at me. "Grandma, I'm not going crazy, am I? Daddy thinks I am, but I feel like all of this is real." I held her small face between my hands and promised her I would never doubt her. At that moment, I made a definitive decision. I would continue investigating, even if it meant confronting Robert and risking temporarily losing my time with Mia, because I knew, deep in my heart, that the answer to her suffering was out there somewhere, and I was going to find it. The next day, while Robert was at work and Mia was at school, I drove to Clearwater. There was one thing I needed to check: the photos our beach neighbor Mrs. Diaz had mentioned. If there really was a picture of that man walking on water, it might be the proof that we weren't imagining everything. Mrs. Diaz greeted me with a warm smile, but when I mentioned the photos, her expression changed completely. She led me to her living room and, with trembling hands, showed me a yellow envelope with developed photographs. "Catherine, when I first saw this, I thought there was a problem with the film or the developing, but just look at this." The photo she showed me made my world stop. There he was, the man in white, walking on the waves toward Mia. His clothes truly looked dry, and there was a strange luminosity around his figure, as if he himself were a source of light. But the most striking thing was that, in the background of the photo, I could see myself running across the sand, and the look of despair on my face contrasted sharply with his absolute serenity. "Mrs. Diaz, can I keep this photo?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You can take it, Catherine. To be honest, this image makes me uneasy. There's something about it that I can't explain." I returned to Atlanta with the photo tucked carefully in my purse, and a growing certainty that I was on the right path. But I also knew that the next discoveries would bring consequences I couldn't yet foresee, and that Robert's resistance would be only the first of the obstacles I would have to face. The photo in my purse burned like a dangerous secret I was carrying. For 3 days I looked at that image dozens of times, trying to find some logical explanation for what I was seeing. But every time I observed that man walking on water, my certainty about the extraordinary nature of the event only grew. Robert had intensified his surveillance of my activities after finding out about my trip to Clearwater. He would call several times during the day to know where I was, and had instructed Mia not to talk to me about beach-related matters. My granddaughter, obedient and wanting to please her father, tried to follow his instructions, but I could see in her eyes the constant struggle between the desire to share her experiences and the fear of disappointing Robert. It was on a Thursday morning while walking through downtown Atlanta trying to organize my thoughts that I passed by the public library, and an idea struck me. If that man had truly saved other people over the years, as Mia had suggested in her dreams, maybe there were historical records, old accounts, some documentation that could give me clues. The librarian, a woman with gray hair and thick glasses, received me patiently when I explained I was researching old stories about miraculous rescues on the Florida coast. She directed me to the section of historical archives and old newspapers, suggesting I start with local periodicals from the coastal cities. For hours, I flipped through yellowed copies of newspapers from Clearwater, St. Anne, Petersburg, Sarasota, and other cities in the region, looking for any mention of unusual rescues or mysterious appearances. At first, I only found routine reports of drownings prevented by lifeguards or brave beachgoers. But then, in a Clearwater newspaper dated 1987, I found a small article that made my heart race. Child mysteriously saved from ocean waters. The account was brief, almost hidden among other local news, but it described the rescue of a 6-year-old boy who had been swept away by the waves during a storm. According to witnesses, a man dressed in white had appeared out of nowhere, rescued the child, and disappeared without a trace. I continued searching with renewed enthusiasm, and over the next 2 hours I found 3 more similar reports, one from 1979, another from 1993, and a third from 2001. All described rescues performed by a mysterious man, always dressed in white, who appeared during emergencies and vanished immediately after ensuring the victim's safety. What struck me most was that in every case, the rescued individuals later developed a special sensitivity for perceiving danger or helping others in need. One of the reports mentioned that the child saved in 1993 had become a young woman who always knew when someone needed help, saving several people over the years through her premonitions. I carefully copied all the reports I found and left the library, with the feeling that I was finally beginning to unravel a mystery much bigger than I had imagined. But I also felt the weight of responsibility that this discovery brought. If Mia was really part of a pattern that had been repeating for decades, it meant she had a specific purpose that we did not yet fully understand. When I got home, I found a situation that deeply worried me. Robert was in the living room, talking on the phone with someone, and from the tone of his voice, I realized he was discussing something serious. Mia was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. As soon as Robert hung up, he turned to me with an expression that mixed anger and determination. "Mom, I need to inform you of a decision I've made. I spoke with Dr. Harris, Mia's psychologist, and he recommended that she spend some time away from home for more intensive treatment." I felt as if the floor had disappeared from under my feet. "Robert, what are you talking about?" "There's a specialized clinic for childhood disorders in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a peaceful environment, away from all the influences that might be confusing her. Dr. Harris thinks 2 weeks of intensive therapy could help her overcome these episodes." I looked at Mia, who stared back at me with an expression of absolute panic. She got up from the couch and ran into my arms, clinging to me as if her life depended on it. Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and comment where you're watching from. Back to the story. Grandma, please don't let him take me to that place, she whispered in my ear, trembling. The man from the beach told me in my dreams that this will be very bad for me. Robert approached and tried to separate Mia from me. Honey, it's for your own good. You need professional help. And here at home, with all this talk about angels and miraculous rescues, you won't be able to recover. Robert, please, let's talk about this calmly, I tried to argue. Mia doesn't need to be institutionalized. She's fine, she's just going through an adjustment period after the scare she had. But Robert had already made up his mind. He showed me the papers he had signed, authorizing Mia's temporary admission to the clinic. According to him, it was the only way to protect his daughter from what he considered harmful influences on her mental development. That night, Mia slept in my bed, holding on to me as if it were the last time we would see each other. Through tears, she told me about her most recent dreams with the man in white. Grandma, he told me you'll discover important things while I'm away. He said there's a very old lady who lives near the beach and was also saved by him when she was a child. She will help you understand everything. What's her name, my love? Evangeline. She lives in a yellow house near the lighthouse in Clearwater, and she's 92 years old. The man said she has been keeping secrets for a long time, but now it's time to tell them. The next morning, my heart broke as I watched Robert take Mia to the clinic in Asheville. My granddaughter looked at me through the rear car window until she disappeared around the corner, and I felt as if a part of me was being torn away. Alone at home, with the silence weighing on me like a tombstone, I made a final decision. I would use the time Mia was institutionalized to uncover the whole truth about the man in white and the purpose behind the rescues he performed. If there really was a 92-year-old Evangeline who could give me answers, I would find her. The next day, I drove to Clearwater again, this time with a specific mission. I searched the entire city for a yellow house near the lighthouse, asking shopkeepers and old-timers about a lady named Evangeline. It was a fisherman named Ben, who finally gave me the information I was looking for. Evangeline Fisher. Of course I know her. A very special lady lives alone in that little yellow house at the end of Lighthouse Street. She's over 90, but still as sharp as a tack. They say she has incredible stories to tell, but she's very private. When I knocked on the door of the yellow house, a tiny woman opened it, her blue eyes still bright despite her advanced age. Before I could even introduce myself, she smiled and said, "You're the grandmother of the girl who was saved by the angel, aren't you? I've been expecting you." A chill ran down my spine. "How do you know?" "Come in, dear. We have much to talk about, and time is moving faster than you think." Evangeline led me to a simple but cozy living room, filled with old photographs and objects that seemed to hold decades of history. She served me tea and sat in her favorite armchair, her eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me feel as if she could see right into my soul. "Catherine, may I call you that? I am 92 years old, and I was saved by the same man when I was only 8. That was in 1939, during a terrible hurricane that hit Clearwater. Since then, I have carried secrets I've never told anyone, waiting for the day someone like you would show up at my door." Her words confirmed my deepest suspicions, but also brought a sense that I was about to discover something that would completely change my understanding of what had happened to Mia. Evangeline served the tea with hands that trembled slightly, but her eyes maintained a clarity that was impressive for someone 92 years old. The house smelled of lavender and old memories, and every object around me seemed to carry decades of untold stories. "Catherine, what I am about to tell you will sound impossible, but I swear on the memory of my parents, that every word is true." She took a sip of tea and a deep breath. "In 1939, I was 8 years old and lived with my grandparents in this very house. My parents had passed away a few years earlier, and I was a very lonely and stubborn child." Her words immediately reminded me of Mia, and I felt a pang in my chest, thinking of my granddaughter confined in that clinic, away from me. It was September, and a hurricane like no one had ever seen hit Clearwater. The waves were so high they almost reached our door, and the wind howled as if the world were ending. My grandparents forbade me from leaving the house, but I, stubborn as I was, decided to go to the beach to see the fury of nature up close. Evangeline got up with difficulty and went to an old dresser, from which she took out an ornate wooden box. Inside were dozens of yellowed photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notebooks. A gigantic wave knocked me down and dragged me into the sea. I remember the feeling of being pulled under, the salt water burning my lungs, the despair of not being able to scream for help. Her eyes filled with tears. "That's when he appeared. Exactly as he appeared for your granddaughter. A tall man, dressed in white, walking on the waves as if it were solid ground." She showed me an old, faded photograph, but one where it was still possible to distinguish a clear figure saving a small child from the raging waters. My grandfather was an amateur photographer and had gone out to document the storm when he saw me being dragged away. He managed to photograph the exact moment of my rescue. Evangeline pointed to the figure in the photo. "Look, Catherine, it's the same man who saved your granddaughter. He hasn't aged a day in all these years." I took the photograph with trembling hands and mentally compared it to the image Mrs. Diaz had given me. It was undeniable. It was the same person, the same features, the same posture, the same supernatural serenity. After he brought me back to the beach, he said the exact same words he said to your granddaughter. "She'll be fine. Take care of her. She's special." Evangeline sat back down, her hands gripping the arms of the chair tightly. And just like Mia, I started to develop different perceptions. I knew when someone was in danger, when a storm was approaching, when people close to me needed help. "And your grandparents? How did they react?" "At first, they were scared. They took me to doctors, priests, folk healers. Nothing explained what was happening to me. But unlike your granddaughter's father, my grandparents were people of simple faith and eventually accepted that I had been touched by something divine." Evangeline opened one of the handwritten notebooks and showed me pages upon pages of careful notes. "For all these years, I have kept a record of every person I helped through my premonitions. There are hundreds of cases, Catherine. Accidents avoided, people found when they were lost, illnesses discovered before they became serious." She turned the pages slowly. "But I also recorded every time I heard about other rescues performed by the same man. The notes were meticulous and organized chronologically. I saw dozens of reports similar to what had happened to me and Mia, always following the same pattern. A child in danger, a man in white appearing out of nowhere to save them, and the subsequent development of special abilities. "How many people like us are there?" I asked, fascinated and frightened at the same time. "In the last few decades, I've managed to identify at least 12 cases just in the Clearwater area and neighboring cities. But I suspect there are many more scattered along the entire American coast." Evangeline looked at me intently. "Catherine, we are not just people who were saved by a miracle. We are part of something bigger, something I still don't fully understand." She told me that over the years she had managed to contact some of the other people saved by the man in white. 3 of them still lived in the region and kept regular contact with her. All had developed similar abilities and dedicated their lives to helping others through their gifts. "There's Connie, saved in 1967, when she was 9. She lives in Tampa and has worked for decades as a volunteer at the local hospital, always knowing intuitively which patients need more attention There's Tony, saved in 1981, who became a fisherman with an incredible ability to locate people lost at sea. And also Sister Lucy, who was saved in 1995 and today runs a shelter for abandoned children. The revelation that there was a whole network of people connected by the same experience left me simultaneously relieved and overwhelmed. On one hand, it meant Mia was not alone on her journey. On the other, it indicated that there were responsibilities and challenges ahead that I couldn't yet fathom. Evangeline, why are you telling me all this now? Why did you keep it a secret for so many years? She sighed deeply and looked at me with an old sadness in her eyes. Because I feel my time is coming to an end, dear. At 92, every day is a gift, and I need to ensure this knowledge doesn't die with me. She paused. But mainly because your granddaughter is special, even among the special. In my recent dreams, the man in white has been appearing more frequently, saying that Mia will be different from the others. Different how? She won't just be someone who uses her gifts to help people individually. She will be a bridge, a way to connect all of us who were touched by him over the years. According to what he told me, the time has come for us to step out of the shadows and work together. Evangeline's words filled me with a mixture of hope and terror. If my granddaughter truly had such an important role, it would explain why her abilities were so intense and why she was suffering so much with them. But there is a serious problem, Evangeline continued, her voice taking on a tone of urgency. Mia's father, by trying to cure her of this condition, may be harming not only her but also all of us who depend on the connection she represents. My heart went cold. What do you mean? Catherine, when a child saved by the man in white is prevented from naturally developing their gifts, it creates an imbalance that affects the entire network. In the last few weeks since I learned of Mia's institutionalization, I have received worried calls from Connie and the others. They are all reporting that their premonitions are becoming confused, their gifts weakening. The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning. Robert, in his well-intentioned attempt to protect his daughter, could be causing irreparable damage not only to Mia, but to dozens of people who depended on their abilities to save lives. What can I do? I asked, feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. Evangeline handed me a piece of paper with addresses and phone numbers. First, you need to meet the others. Tomorrow, I will call Connie, Tony, and Sister Lucy. We will meet here, and together we will plan how to help Mia and restore the balance that is being threatened. As I was preparing to leave, she held my hand with a surprising strength for her age. Catherine, there is one more thing you need to know. The man in white appeared in my dreams last night, and for the first time in decades, he seemed worried. He said that forces contrary to his work are mobilizing, and that we need to act quickly to protect Mia before it's too late. I drove back to Atlanta with my mind buzzing with information, and a growing sense that I was involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than I had imagined. Mia's institutionalization was not just a family matter. It was a threat to a delicate system that had been working for decades to protect and save people. Evangeline's call came the next morning, her voice filled with an urgency that made me drop everything immediately. Catherine, I've contacted everyone. They've agreed to meet at my house this afternoon. Connie is very worried. She said that yesterday she couldn't sense that a hospital patient was about to go into cardiac arrest. It's the first time in 20 years that's happened. The drive to Clearwater had never seemed so long. The entire way, I thought of Mia, isolated in that clinic, likely confused and scared, not understanding why she was being punished for something she couldn't control. Robert had forbidden me from visiting her during the first few days of treatment, claiming my presence might hinder the therapeutic process. When I arrived at Evangeline's yellow house, I found 3 strangers waiting in the living room. A woman in her 60s with gray hair and a hospital scrub top, a sun-tanned middle-aged man with the calloused hands of a fisherman, and a young nun of about 40, wearing a simple habit. "Catherine, let me introduce the other guardians," Evangeline said solemnly. "This is Connie Richards, saved in 1967, a nurse for over 30 years at Tampa General Hospital." Connie stood up and greeted me with a firm handshake, her eyes revealing a deep concern. "Mrs. Sellers, I am deeply distressed. Yesterday, for the first time since I developed my sensitivity, I couldn't sense that Mr. Henderson, an elderly patient, was about to have a heart attack. Luckily, one of the other nurses noticed the signs, but if it had been up to me, he might have passed. This is Tony Marks," Evangeline continued, pointing to the fisherman. "Saved in 1981 at age 10. For 20 years he has helped the Coast Guard locate people lost at sea." Tony, with his deep, calming voice typical of seamen, told me his recent experience. "Mrs. Sellers, the day before yesterday a family of tourists went missing during a boat trip. Normally, I can feel exactly where to look, as if something guides me to people. But this time, it was like my internal compass was broken. We spent hours searching in the wrong place until other fishermen found them by chance." The nun introduced herself as Sister Lucy Santos, saved in 1995 when she was 8. "I've been running St. Francis Home, a shelter for at-risk children, for 15 years. My ability has always been to sense when a child was being mistreated or was in danger, even before physical signs appeared." Her voice trembled slightly. "But in recent days, that perception is failing. I fear that a child under my protection may be suffering without my noticing." Evangeline served us tea and homemade cookies, creating a welcoming atmosphere despite the gravity of the situation. "My dears, what we are experiencing is no coincidence. For decades, we have functioned as an interconnected network, each of us a point of light helping to maintain balance. When Mia was saved, she became a kind of center of this network." "What do you mean?" I asked, still trying to process all the information. "Imagine our connection as a web," Connie explained. "Each of us is a thread in that web, and Mia represents the central point where all the threads meet. When she is in harmony with her gifts, the web remains strong and stable. But when she is forced to suppress her abilities, the whole web becomes fragile," Tony completed, nodding gravely. "That's why our gifts are failing." Sister Lucy leaned forward, her hands clasped as if in prayer. "Mrs. Sellers, we must act quickly. This isn't just about Mia or us. There are hundreds of people who indirectly depend on our abilities to stay safe." Evangeline opened her memory box again and took out an old map of the Florida coast, marked with various colored dots. "All these years, I have mapped the locations where the rescues occurred and the areas where each of us operates. Look at the pattern." The map showed an intricate network of imaginary lines connecting all the marked points, forming a kind of protective shield along the entire coast. At the geographical center of this network was Clearwater, and more specifically, the beach where Mia had been saved. "Mia was not chosen by chance," Evangeline continued. "Her location, her timing, her very essence were precisely planned so that she could serve as the center of this protection. But there is something else I need to tell you." She took from the bottom of the box a sealed envelope, yellowed with time. "My grandfather, before he passed away 50 years ago, left me this envelope with instructions to open it only when the child of the center appeared. I opened it last night." With trembling hands, Evangeline removed a handwritten letter in old, careful script from the envelope. "My grandfather wrote that the man in white was not just an occasional savior. He is a guardian tasked with maintaining a very ancient balance, a protection that has existed for centuries along this coast." The letter revealed that for generations, entire families had been chosen to be part of this protective network. But something had changed in the last century, forcing the Guardian to work with isolated individuals instead of complete family lines. According to my grandfather, Mia represents the possibility of restoring the original system. She is not just a saved child who developed special gifts. She is the first of a new generation that can reunify all the lines of protection that have been fragmented over time. Tony gently tapped his fist on the table. So, her father, by trying to cure her, is undoing decades of work and putting the entire coast at risk. Not just the coast, Sister Lucy replied gravely. If this system has truly existed for centuries, as the letter suggests, its disruption could have consequences we can't even imagine. Connie stood up and began to pace the room, clearly agitated. We have to do something. We can't just sit here while an innocent child suffers, and our ability to help others deteriorates. Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and comment where you're watching from. Back to the story. But what can we do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the situation. Robert is her father. He has legal rights, and he's convinced he's doing what's best for his daughter. Evangeline looked at me with determination. Catherine, there is one last thing in my grandfather's letter that I haven't mentioned yet. He wrote that in situations of extreme crisis, the Guardian himself would intervene directly. But that would only happen if all the other chosen ones united for a single purpose. You mean the man in white might appear to help us? More than that, said Evangeline, her eyes shining with a light I hadn't seen in a long time. If we gather physically at the spot where Mia was saved and focus our energies on calling him, he will come. But there is a price. What price? Each of us will have to permanently give up a part of our gifts to form a channel strong enough for him to manifest physically in the world. After that, our abilities will be significantly reduced, but Mia will be freed, and the network will be restored. The silence that followed was heavy. We were talking about sacrificing something that had defined our lives for decades, but also about saving an innocent child and maintaining the protection of hundreds of people. Sister Lucy was the first to break the silence. If that's what needs to be done to protect the children under my care and bring peace back to Mia, I am willing. Tony nodded gravely. I've been saving people at sea for 20 years. If I can save one last child by giving up my gifts, it's worth it. Connie sighed deeply. I've spent 3 decades helping patients through my sensitivity. If this sacrifice can ensure that future generations have the same protection, I accept. All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of the decision on my shoulders, knowing that once we took this path, there would be no turning back. When do we do this? I asked, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. Tonight, Evangeline replied. On the beach where it all began, in the early hours of the morning, when the energies are purest. But I must warn you, after today, our lives will never be the same. Clearwater Beach was unrecognizable under the moonlight of that May pre-dawn. The waves broke with a hypnotic gentleness, completely different from the turmoil of the morning Mia was saved. We were 5 solitary figures walking toward the exact spot where it had all begun, each of us carrying the weight of the sacrifice we were about to make. Evangeline, despite her 92 years, showed a surprising determination as she walked, leaning on her cane. She had insisted on coming with us, claiming that as the eldest of the chosen, her presence was crucial for the ritual. Connie carried a small bag with white candles and sea salt, items that, according to Evangeline's grandfather's letter, were necessary to create the circle of summoning. Tony had brought an old anchor from his fishing boat, an object he said he had inherited from his father, and that had always guided him to find people lost at sea. Sister Lucy carried a century-old rosary that had belonged to the founding mother of her convent, a piece she considered her strongest connection to the divine. I brought with me the photograph Mrs. Diaz had given me, showing the man in white saving Mia. It was the only physical proof I had of that moment that had changed our lives, and I felt it was important to have it during the ritual. "This is it," Evangeline said when we reached the spot where Mia's footprints might have been. "Form a circle around me. Each of you must hold the object you brought and focus on your deepest connection with the Guardian." We followed her instructions reverently. Connie lit 5 white candles, placing one in front of each of us, and poured a continuous line of sea salt, forming a perfect circle around us. The salty aroma mixed with the candle wax created a solemn and mystical atmosphere. "Now, close your eyes and remember the exact moment you were saved," Evangeline instructed, her voice taking on a ceremonial tone I had never heard before. "Feel again the gratitude, the relief, the transformation that occurred within you at that instant." I closed my eyes and mentally transported myself to that desperate morning when I saw Mia being dragged away by the waves. I relived every second of panic, the run across the sand, the feeling of total helplessness. And then, as if it were happening again, I saw the man in white emerging from the waters, his presence bringing an inexplicable peace in the midst of the chaos. Around me, I could sense that the others were also immersed in their own memories. Connie was murmuring softly words I couldn't understand, but that sounded like an ancient prayer. Tony was swaying slightly, as if he were on the deck of his boat facing stormy seas. Sister Lucy remained motionless, but tears streamed silently down her face. "Now," Evangeline said, her voice echoing strangely on the empty beach, "offer your gifts. Feel the energy you have carried for all these years flowing out of you, forming a channel of calling that he cannot ignore." What happened next was something I could never adequately describe. I felt as if something fundamental to me was being gently extracted, not with pain, but with a deep melancholy, as if I were saying goodbye to an essential part of who I was. It was as if a warm light that had always inhabited my chest was moving outward, joining other similar lights coming from my companions. The air around us began to vibrate with a visible energy, small golden points of light dancing like fireflies around our circle. The candles burned with an intensity far greater than they should have, their flames stretching upward to form luminous columns that seemed to touch the stars. That's when he appeared. He did not emerge from the waters this time, but materialized gradually in the center of our circle, as if being formed by the very light we had offered. He was exactly as I remembered him, tall, serene, dressed in immaculate white, with deep blue eyes that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. "You have made a great sacrifice," he said, his voice carrying that same musical quality that had marked me so deeply. "And your love for the child you protect is genuine and pure. Therefore, I will answer your call." He turned to me, and I felt as if I were being analyzed to my very soul. "Catherine, your granddaughter is suffering more than you can imagine. The place where she is being held does not understand the nature of her gifts, and is trying to suppress them through methods that could cause permanent damage to her essence." My heart went cold. "How can I get her out of there? Robert will never listen to me." "You will not need to convince him with words," the Guardian replied with an enigmatic smile. "Sometimes the truth reveals itself in ways that cannot be denied or ignored. Tomorrow at dawn, Robert will receive a call that will completely change his perspective on his daughter's condition." He extended his hand and lightly touched the air above each of our heads. "Your sacrifices were not in vain. Although your individual gifts have been reduced, you are now part of something greater. You will be the keepers of the knowledge, responsible for guiding future generations of the chosen." "And Mia?" Evangeline asked urgently. "Will she be okay?" "Mia will not only be okay. She will become the bridge that reconnects all the fragmented lines over the centuries. Through her, the system of protection will be restored, not only in this region but along the entire American coast." He paused, looking at each of us. "But this will only be possible if she grows up in an environment that accepts and cultivates her gifts naturally. The guardian began to fade gradually, his form becoming translucent like morning mist. Remember, you have not lost your gifts. You have only transformed them. Now, instead of saving individuals, you will help form a new generation of protectors who will save thousands. Before disappearing completely, he looked at me one last time. Catherine, prepare yourself. The coming days will bring profound changes, but also hope. Your faith will be rewarded. And then he was gone, leaving us alone on the silent beach. The candles extinguished simultaneously. The sea salt was carried away by the night breeze, and the 5 of us remained in the circle, united by an experience none of us would ever forget. I immediately felt the difference within me. The special sensitivity I had begun to develop after Mia's rescue had almost completely vanished, replaced by a deep serenity and an unshakable certainty that I had done the right thing. "How do you all feel?" Evangeline asked, her voice more fragile after the ritual. "Different," Connie replied, "but not empty. It's as if a responsibility has been lifted from my shoulders, and a new, more important one has taken its place." Tony nodded. "I can no longer feel where the people lost at sea are, but I feel I can teach other fishermen to develop that skill naturally." "And I," said Sister Lucy, "no longer automatically sense when a child is suffering, but I feel I can help other adults become more sensitive to the signs of childhood danger." We walked back to our cars in contemplative silence. Each of us knew we had participated in something extraordinary, something that would change not only Mia's destiny, but potentially that of many other people in future generations. As I said goodbye to the others, Evangeline held my hand one last time. "Catherine, what is about to happen in the next few hours may seem frightening at first, but trust the guardian. He has never failed in his promises in all the years I've known him." I drove back to Atlanta with a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. I didn't know exactly what to expect from the call Robert would receive at dawn, but I had a deep certainty that our fight to save Mia was coming to a resolution. When I arrived home, I found a message on the answering machine. It was from Robert, and his voice sounded strange, almost shaken. "Mom, something strange happened at the clinic today. I need to talk to you urgently. Please call me as soon as you get in." I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the morning. The call the guardian had promised had arrived even before dawn. I called Robert immediately, even though it was 4 in the morning. He answered on the first ring, as if he had been awake waiting for my call. His voice was trembling, completely different from the authoritative, controlled tone I knew. "Mom, thank God you called. I need to tell you what happened at the clinic last night. I still can't believe it, but I have witnesses." He took a long pause. "Mom, maybe I've been wrong about Mia all along." My heart pounded. "Robert, what happened?" "Around 2 in the morning, there was a fire in the children's wing of the clinic. A piece of electrical equipment malfunctioned and started to burn. The alarm system failed for some reason, and the night shift nurses didn't notice it right away." His breathing was ragged. "Mom, it was Mia who saved all the children." Tears welled in my eyes. "What do you mean, Robert?" "She woke up in the middle of the night screaming that there was a fire at the clinic, that the other children were in danger. The nurse on duty, a Mrs. Margaret, first thought it was a nightmare, but Mia insisted so much that she decided to check. When they reached the wing where the fire had started, they found 3 children who were admitted there unconscious from smoke inhalation." Robert paused to catch his breath. His voice choked with emotion. "If Mia hadn't sensed the danger and alerted the staff, those children they might not have survived." The firefighter who responded to the scene said that another 15 minutes, and it would have been too late. "And that's not all, Mom. During the rescue, Mia showed knowledge impossible for a 7-year-old. She knew exactly where each child was, even though she had never visited that wing of the clinic. She guided the nurses through the smoke-filled corridors as if she were a living map. A wave of pride and relief washed over me. The Guardian had fulfilled his promise in a way that not even Robert could deny or rationalize. "But there's more," Robert continued, his voice now filled with awe. One of the rescued children, an 8-year-old boy named Gabriel, had been hospitalized for months with severe depression after losing his parents in an accident. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. But after Mia saved him, he started talking again. Not just talking. He's laughing, playing, as if he's become a normal child again. Dr. Harris, the same psychologist who recommended Mia's admission, witnessed everything. He called me an hour ago, completely shaken, saying that in 30 years of his career, he had never seen such a rapid and complete recovery as Gabriel's, and that it was triggered specifically by contact with Mia. Robert took a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was broken with emotion. "Mom, Dr. Harris told me there is no medical explanation for what Mia did last night. Her ability to perceive danger, to know exactly where to find the other children, to bring about an instant recovery in Gabriel. He said I'm dealing with something that transcends conventional science." "And what do you think now, Robert?" I asked, barely able to contain my own emotion. "I think I was an arrogant fool who almost destroyed something precious because I couldn't accept that there are things in the world my scientific training can't explain," he sobbed. "Mom, Mia isn't sick. She never was. She's special in a way I didn't know how to recognize. Where is she now?" "Dr. Harris discharged her immediately after the incident. He said it would be harmful to keep her there now that it's clear her perceptions are genuine and beneficial. We're on our way back to Atlanta now. She really wants to see you." 2 hours later, I heard the sound of Robert's car pulling up in front of the house. I ran to the door and opened it before they could even knock. Mia leapt from the back seat and ran into my arms with an energy and joy I hadn't seen in months. "Grandma, I knew you were trying to help me. The man from the beach visited me last night and said that you and his other friends did something very important to help me." Her eyes shone with pure happiness. "He said now I can use my gifts to help people without being afraid." Robert approached us with an expression that mixed regret, relief, and a newfound understanding. "Mom, I need to apologize for everything. For not believing, for being so stubborn, for almost causing irreparable harm to my own daughter." I hugged my son, feeling all the tension of the past few months finally dissipate. "Robert, you're a father who loves his daughter and wanted to protect her. There's nothing to forgive, but there's something I need to understand," he said, looking at Mia, who was playing happily in the living room as if the last few months of suffering had never happened. "How did you know Mia truly had a gift? How did you keep the faith when even I, her own father, doubted?" I told Robert about my entire investigation. The conversation with Jake, the former lifeguard, the meeting with Evangeline and the other chosen ones, the photographs that proved the appearances of the man in white over the decades, and finally, about the ritual the night before. Robert listened in absolute silence, occasionally shaking his head in amazement. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, processing all the information. "Mom, does this mean Mia isn't the only one? That there are other people like her?" "There were," I corrected gently. "But with the sacrifice we made last night, Mia has become something different. She's not just another person with special gifts. She is the bridge that will reconnect an entire system of protection that has worked for centuries." "And what does that mean, exactly?" It was Mia who answered, with a surprising maturity for her 7 years. "Daddy, it means I'm going to help other kids like me understand their gifts. I'm going to teach adults not to be afraid when their children show special abilities. And I'm going to make sure no one else has to suffer like I did." Robert knelt before his daughter and held her small hands. Mia, do you forgive me for not understanding? For trying to fix something that wasn't broken? Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and comment where you're watching from. Back to the story. Mia smiled with an ancient wisdom shining in her young eyes. Daddy, you always protected me the way you knew how. Now you know a new way. That's all? That afternoon, Robert made several important phone calls. First to Dr. Harris, asking for recommendations on how to properly support a child with special abilities. Then to Mia's school, explaining the situation and requesting that teachers be instructed on how to handle her unique perceptions. Most surprisingly, he called his own boss and requested a transfer to the company's office in Tampa, explaining that he wanted to be closer to the coast, where Mia felt more connected to her gifts. Mom, Robert said as we watched Mia play in the yard, I want to learn everything about this protection network she's part of. I want to meet Evangeline and the others. I want to understand how I can support my daughter instead of trying to change her. And are you prepared to accept that some things simply can't be explained scientifically? Robert smiled for the first time in months. After what I saw at the clinic, I'm prepared to accept that the science I know is just a small part of a much larger and more mysterious universe. That night, while Robert slept soundly for the first time in weeks, Mia came to my room. Grandma, I want to tell you about the dream I had at the clinic, before the fire. Tell me, my love. I saw you and the other friends on the beach, making that circle. I saw you giving your lights to call the man in white, and I saw when he promised that everything would be okay. She hugged me tightly. Thank you for not giving up on me. I would never give up on you, Mia. Never. The man in white told me that the most important days of my life are starting now, that I'm going to meet other children like me, that I'll help families understand each other, that I'll make the network strong again. She paused, looking out the window at the stars, and he said, You're going to help me with all of it. I felt a wave of renewed purpose rush through me. Even having sacrificed part of my own gifts, there was still a fundamental role for me to play in Mia's journey. I'm ready, my love, I said, kissing her hair. We're ready. 2 years have passed since that transformative night on Clearwater Beach, and looking back, I can say with absolute certainty that every tear shed, every moment of doubt, and every sacrifice made was worth it to get here. Robert fulfilled his promise to move to the Tampa Bay area, and our new life in the coastal city has brought a family harmony I hadn't experienced in decades. Mia, now 9, has blossomed in a way that surpassed even our most optimistic expectations. The house Robert bought is just a 15-minute drive from the beach where it all began, and Mia has developed the habit of walking there every morning before school, as if daily renewing her connection with the guardian who changed her life. I often join her on these morning walks, and in those moments, I feel a deep peace I never imagined possible. What impresses me most is how Mia has learned to use her gifts naturally and without fear. At her new school, she became known as the child who always knew when someone was sad, sick, or needed help. The teachers, initially surprised, soon understood they had an extraordinary student and began to consult her informally about the well-being of other students. It was through the school that we met the family of Lucas, an 8-year-old boy who had been saved from drowning in Fort Myers 6 months before Mia's incident. His parents, Sandra and Mark, were going through the same confusion and despair we had faced when Lucas began to display perceptual abilities similar to Mia's. Sandra sought me out after one of the school teachers mentioned our experience. When she arrived at our home, she was crying with relief. Catherine, I thought my son was going crazy. He knew when it would rain, predicted minor accidents, woke up in the middle of the night saying someone needed help. The doctors found nothing wrong, but my husband was considering psychiatric hospitalization. It was this meeting that planted the seed of what would become our most important project. Together with Evangeline, who, despite being 94, maintains an impressive lucidity, we created an informal support group for families of children who had developed special abilities after water-related traumatic experiences. Robert, using his engineering and organizational skills, structured the group systematically. We created a small communication network among the families, organized monthly meetings at Evangeline's house, and established protocols for identifying and welcoming new children who might be part of this protection network. In 2 years, our group has grown from 2 families to 16. Each new child we found confirmed the pattern we had identified: a miraculous rescue by a mysterious figure, the subsequent development of perception and protection abilities, and initial family resistance followed by gradual acceptance. Connie, Tony, and Sister Lucy became fundamental mentors in the process. Even with their individual gifts reduced, they developed an extraordinary ability to guide parents on how to support and nurture their children's special abilities. Each took on specific responsibilities. Connie works on aspects related to the children's health and well-being. Tony teaches about connecting with natural elements, and Sister Lucy focuses on spiritual and emotional development. The most emotional moment came last year, when Mia first demonstrated her ability to awaken other children to their own gifts. During one of our monthly meetings, a 6-year-old girl named Sophia, who had been recently saved but had not yet manifested special abilities, held Mia's hand during a group activity. Instantly, Sophia began to describe details about the other participants that she couldn't have known conventionally, that Lucas's mother was worried about problems at work, that another boy's father had hurt his foot that morning, that Evangeline was missing someone special who had passed away long ago. "It's like Mia is a catalyst," Robert explained later, still marveling at what he had witnessed. "She not only has her own gifts, but she can activate and amplify the dormant gifts in other children." This discovery confirmed what the Guardian had said about Mia being different, being the bridge that would reconnect all the fragmented lines. Through her, we were literally rebuilding the protection network that had been weakened over the centuries. The challenges, of course, still exist. Not all the families we find are open to accepting the special nature of their children. Some parents, like Robert initially was, prefer the security of conventional medical explanations to the extraordinary possibilities their children represent. But with each passing month, our network grows stronger. The children grow up confident in their abilities. The parents learn to be guardians instead of skeptics. And the protection we offer expands along the entire Florida coast. Robert has become a passionate advocate for the project. He uses his technical skills to methodically document each case, create efficient communication systems between families, and even develop training protocols for new mentors. "Mom," he told me recently, "I've discovered my true calling wasn't just to build things, but to build communities. And this community is building something far more important than any building I could ever design. Mia has blossomed beyond our wildest dreams. She is not just a child with special gifts. She has become a natural leader, a source of inspiration for children and adults alike. Her charisma and natural wisdom attract people of all ages, and we often receive visits from families from other parts of the country who have heard about our work. Most importantly, Mia retains her childlike essence. She plays, laughs, gets into mischief, has silly preferences for candy and cartoons. Her special gifts haven't made her a serious or burdened child. They have simply become a natural part of who she is, like having brown hair or liking chocolate ice cream. Last month, during our monthly visit to the beach where it all began, Mia surprised me with a revelation that moved me deeply. "Grandma, the man in white visited me in my dreams last week. He said the first phase of the work is complete, that the basic network has been restored. Now the second phase begins." What second phase, my love? Teaching other people, who weren't saved by him, to develop similar sensitivities through training and dedication. He said that not all protectors need a traumatic experience to awaken their gifts. Some can learn through example and practice. The implication was extraordinary. If Mia could truly teach ordinary people to develop skills of perception and protection, we would be talking about a social transformation much broader than we had imagined. And he said one more thing, Grandma. He said that you're going to write a book telling our story. Not to become famous or make money, but so that other families around the world can recognize when they are going through similar experiences and not feel alone like we did at the beginning. I looked at my granddaughter, this extraordinary child who had transformed not only our family, but potentially the lives of hundreds of people, and I felt a deep gratitude for being chosen to be part of her journey. Today, as I write these last lines of the story I was asked to tell, Mia is in the backyard playing with Lucas and Sophia, 3 special children whose laughter fills our home with a joy I thought I had lost forever. Robert is in the kitchen making lunch for the whole family, whistling a tune I hadn't heard in years, completely reconciled with the mystery and magic that permeate our lives. And I, Catherine Sellers, at 65, have discovered that my role in this life was not just to be the grandmother of a special child, but to be the chronicler of a modern miracle, the keeper of a story that needs to be told so that others can find hope in their own extraordinary journeys. Angels exist, of that I no longer have any doubt. They appear when we least expect them, saving not only our bodies but our souls. And then they teach us that we all have the potential to be angels in the lives of others. The story of Mia and the man in white who saved her is just beginning. But one thing I can guarantee: as long as there are children in danger and families willing to believe in the impossible, this network of protection will continue to grow, saving lives and spreading hope wherever it is needed. Because in the end we discovered that the real miracles are not just the dramatic rescues we witness, but the quiet, profound transformations that occur when we allow love to conquer fear, when we choose faith over skepticism, and when we understand that we are all part of something much larger and more beautiful than we can imagine alone. Made it to the end? Thank you so much for your attention. For more videos like this to be possible, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's fast, free, and makes all the difference.